Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime, here at my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my kind of thoughts, my preview thoughts heading into Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. So, in general, I don't think on my channel I've really talked about The Last Jedi since any of the trailer stuff has come out. I think more or less the only thing I've ever really talked about was the name. But yeah, let's get into this. We're only at this point 9 days from release, so I will be of course doing a review of the movie once I see it, which will probably be within the first day or two of the movie coming out, but and I'll do some other discussion videos as well. But just so you have something to, I suppose, compare in terms of my previews to my review, here are some of my preview thoughts heading in. So with this movie, I haven't gone crazy with regards to looking at every single little trailer and TV spot that's been released, or looking up articles about what everyone is saying about what will happen. I've kind of just been like, look, it's a Star Wars movie, I'm going to see it, I'm excited for it, of course, but I'm not like, I don't have to take in every single piece of media about it before it comes out. That said, I think the big thing that I'm excited for heading in is definitely just finally getting to see what they're doing with Luke Skywalker in this new trilogy. Because The Force Awakens was all about teasing stuff about him, and then right at the end you see him, but he doesn't do anything, he doesn't say anything. So immediately Episode 8 has that kind of hook, because it's going to pick up immediately from where Episode 7 ended, and there's just going to be so much excitement. For me, there's so much excitement around what's the first thing that Luke is going to do, what's the first thing he's going to say, and just in general, what's he going to be like. Because I find Luke Skywalker heading into this movie so much more interesting than I think Luke in even any of the original trilogy movies, just because he at a base level I think is a fairly simple character. They didn't really try and do anything too crazy with him in the original movies. So this is really going to be, I suppose, potentially some of the first real depth kind of given to the character, with how he views things going forward. And that I think one of the things that has been talked about a lot is this idea of kind of like a grey Jedi, or just a grey Force user who is not full on dark side, not full on light side, but is somewhere in the middle to try and achieve some form of balance that kind of brings in both sides. And obviously we have the whole idea with him that his attempt to bring the Jedi back kind of failed, and he's kind of isolated himself, and so there's just all these questions around, will he full on reveal in this movie why he isolated himself, the full details of what happened, will we get any flashbacks? That sort of thing is big questions. And then if he is going to be training Rey, how is his approach? What are those scenes going to be like? Is it going to be more like we saw in the prequels, that style of Jedi training, or is it going to be more like Yoda, if he even attempts to train her in that sort of a way? So immediately Luke has this just appeal of his interaction with Rey, and just any time he's on screen is going to be such a huge thing. But also then, when he gets introduced potentially into the rest of the plot, in that the First Order were looking for Luke as well. So they obviously want to take him out or use him for some reason. So what's that going to be like? Does Kylo meet Luke, and what's that relationship like, knowing that Luke must know that Kylo killed Han? How does Luke feel about the death of Han, and the fact that Kylo has once again kind of hurt Luke in some way, in terms of he's taken out the new Jedi Order, he's taken out Han, he's seemingly in this movie trying to kill Leia. How does Luke really react to that? Does he want to stop Kylo, or does he have this kind of attachment to him because it's his nephew, isn't it? Yeah, so yeah. This is Leia's son, so yeah, Luke's nephew. So is there any sort of connection there? And that makes that interaction so interesting. There's the whole question of, will Luke and Leia reunite or not? Will that be another kind of tragic thing where we never get to see any of those original three main characters kind of come back together? And then I suppose potentially in terms of some sort of a climax fight, Luke and Snoke, I don't know if we're meant to assume any sort of connection between those two characters, but just in terms of right now, who seems to be the big bad, and then it's Luke, so it makes sense to have something like that happen. But I'll get to talking about Snoke. But just overall, like, the number one thing I'm just excited for going into this movie is just seeing Luke Skywalker. But the other character, of course, I'm excited for, who I really loved from The Force Awakens, was Rey, of course, who is the new main character of this sequel trilogy. And with her, they've definitely been teasing in the marketing material the idea that will she potentially be, tempted by the dark side? Having started off on this kind of light path, will the quest for revenge about what Kylo did to Han cause her to maybe slip to the dark side? With the idea being that Luke seems to be talking about the fact that, like, she has so much raw power in the Force, and she's only seen that like once before, that if she slips to the dark side and doesn't have control over which way she's heading, it could be super dangerous. And I think there's this interesting dynamic of he could be also talking about himself. He could also be worried about how his own power comes across in the Force. Maybe that's why he's isolated himself. And he's afraid that someone else just as powerful as him and Rey could be a problem if she actually is trained. And really the idea, I think, going forward here is probably that I think with Kylo and Rey, they're going for this dynamic of the good character who's being tempted to the dark side, and then the character who starts off in the bad side being tempted back to the light. And that kind of duality, it just creates so many dynamics of, we could very well see this position where, like, Rey slips to the dark side and Kylo kind of slips to the light side, and we kind of switch kind of the position of those two characters in a way by the end of this movie, and there's just need to somehow in the last movie try and get Rey back to the light side, gives at least some semblance of like a redemption arc maybe for Kylo. I don't think you can ever fully do that given what he's done, but some way to kind of balance him out for all the bad he's done. Because I think with Kylo, I can sort of see them maybe going down the road of him moving away from Snoke. Depending on what they do there, I can definitely see us ending this movie with Kylo not as associated with the First Order, and just kind of him on his own doing something. And so even just another prediction of, like, I could maybe see like Kylo and Rey just kind of being off on their own at the end of this movie. This weird dynamic of, like, they're both sort of in the middle, kind of almost grey, like one's leaning towards the light, one leaning towards the darkness, but they're both confused about their place, so they're just together, and all this other stuff going on around them. But coming back to Rey, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what the development is, because this is the idea of, like, she's meeting this legend here in Luke, and she obviously has some sort of expectations. And I think the way they're sort of hinting at us to us about, like, what Luke is like, is that those expectations probably won't be met, and she'll be very concerned about, like, you're meant to be like the hero who, like, won the war in the past and stuff like this. Like, what's happening here? Why won't you train me? And she's really going to have to do a lot to, I think, get anything out of Luke. So it'll be interesting to see her determination in terms of how hard she tries. Is she upset by the fact that, like, Luke is going to be like this, or what? And will Luke's approach maybe further her kind of slip into the dark side, or will her want for revenge be something that, like, means that Luke maybe doesn't want to train her for some reason? That's kind of the idea that I'm definitely interested in. From the trailers, we know that at some point, Kylo seems to ask Rey to join him, and Rey ends up in front of Snoke, and this maybe is some sort of a betrayal moment of, like, maybe it looks like Kylo has betrayed Snoke, and she goes with him, but he just leads her to Snoke, and something happens. And, like, I suppose my prediction maybe for some of the end scenes is probably, like, what we see in the trailer of like Snoke using the Force on Rey and maybe having the advantage over her, potentially that's where Luke comes in, and that's where we get his big, power action moment for Luke as a character. But we'll definitely have to see. There's a lot of, I think, mystery around where exactly they're going at Rey at this point. I don't know, given how liked she is as a character, I don't know if they'd fully commit to like ending the movie with her full on in a dark place. But that said, they sort of in a way did that with, Anakin from the prequel trilogy. I don't think like Anakin was liked as much in that we already knew what the situation was, but just the presentation of the character, that like he's on the good guy side and they're very much leaning towards this dark aspect of him. So they might add a few layers like that in. Talking about Kylo directly, obviously they're teasing in the trailers the idea that like killing Han in the way he did was this kind of thing that like it didn't work in the way he expected it to, in terms of clarifying his position on the dark side. So now he feels that the only way to do it is to take out Leia, and he probably feels maybe similarly about Luke, that he also needs to take out Luke to fully commit to the dark side. But there's definitely a sense of him realizing that it's not working this way, and I hope they emphasize him being pulled back to the light. I'd like to see more reference to the idea that he seems to look up to Darth Vader, and I'd like it if potentially there's some lies going on there about like how aware is he or is he not about the final stages, the final moments of Darth Vader, of the switch back to Anakin Skywalker, and maybe if he finds out about that, does he see some hope for himself and so on. But just the idea that he seems to he sees something in Rey for sure. There's probably a deeper connection there that we'll get at some point, because the other thing with Rey is, of course, will this movie really attempt to touch on her heritage? Will we get the reveal in this one of, are her parents characters we know? Does she have lineage in Force users, or what? And does that link in any way into Kylo? Does he know her from before, or what? Because like there's obviously that crazy theory that like Rey was a recruit at the academy, and like she was taken away and has lost her memories of that time. That's how she's able to be so, somewhat skilled, even though she seemingly in episode 7 has only just learned that she's Force sensitive, that sort of thing. But definitely, I think both Kylo and Rey, it's just so fascinating to see where they go with those characters, and I love how, in a way, similar their arcs are, but like in opposite directions. And I love that, just the idea that we could end the movie with them on very different kind of sides. Snoke is an interesting one in that I think the main thing with Snoke is very similar to just my opinion on the First Order. They need to explain the First Order and Snoke and kind of who he is and what the First Order is, and why we should be calling it the First Order and not just like the Empire 2.0. That's the clarification that they need. I don't know if they necessarily need to, or if I'll be disappointed if he's not revealed to be some sort of other character that we know about. There's been a lot of crazy theories about who Snoke is, but there needs to be an explanation for him, I think, for sure. There has to be something deeper there than just he's some guy who turned up in between movies and is a Force sensitive. The fact that he is seemingly Force sensitive and incredibly powerful and emphasizes the dark side in this era, I think means that you need some deeper explanation about, wait, no, there's a story behind this. You can't just say some other Force sensitive guy is him. So he either needs a really good backstory or just the reveal that he is someone. Because at the moment, like, based purely off episode 7 and the little bits and pieces we know about him, he's just a nondescript villain right now, and he has potential, but we know nothing about him right now. So I hope they give him the development that he needs, and also explain his organization, the First Order, and what they are, why are they different than the Empire, why are they going by that name and not just continuing on the Empire, why the need for the name change. Switching over to some of the other characters in a similar run of things, I feel there also is need in this movie to give a better explanation for why we are calling the rebels the resistance. Now, of course, the obvious thing is that they effectively won that battle, so it switched from like they're the rebels because they're rebelling against the Empire who are in charge. Now it's the rebels who are in charge, so there's no real need to call them the rebels. But like they need to add depth to why the resistance is this important thing. I feel it was barely touched upon in the originals, and there was that really kind of in the background slight idea that people in a way think Leia's a little bit crazy for keeping the resistance running as kind of hardcore as it is, and that not many other people see the First Order as a threat like she does, which makes the idea of like basically the government, the people who disagreed with Leia, more or less being all killed in the attack from Starkiller Base, destroying that system, and the Senate basically. It makes that this kind of moment of like, it should prove to everyone on the good guy side of things that this is why the resistance is needed, and Leia was right about this, that the First Order is this huge threat, but you need, I think, better explanation about it. And that's where like some of the books that came out around the time of The Force Awakens did that to a degree. There was that I can't even remember the name of it now, but that Journey to the Force Awakens kind of book that came out very soon after the movie, and it had like a section for Poe, it had a section for Rey, and it had a section for Finn, and it like developed each of their, it basically set up where they are at the start of episode 7, and I think that book did for me the best job so far at explaining what the resistance is and why it's different, and similarly with the First Order, but I think that needs more development. So let's get into some of these characters. I'll start with Poe, who I feel is the character I think you have to do a lot with him in this movie to get across kind of the position that he's in now, because I think there was a slight danger at the end of episode 7 of just having him become the pilot character who only ever gets dialogue when he's piloting his X-Wing or something like that. But it seems like what they're going to do going forward is emphasize his relationship with Leia a bit more, and the fact that, in a way, he's being built up to be the leader of the resistance, and that it's going to be him more so than anyone else who is leading the charge for the resistance against the First Order. So they have to move Poe quite heavily, I think, into much more of a leadership position, and not so much of just, okay, Leia's in charge, she commands Poe's squad to do this, and he just happens to be the lead pilot in that squad. They need to really move him into a kind of command position. Sort of like Hera, I think, in Rebels right now, of that she is a pilot, but she also comes across as like somewhat of a like sub-leader of the resistance. Of the Rebels in that show, and Poe needs to be the same for the resistance. And I think for sure that the main thing they need to emphasize is his relationship with Leia and establish kind of some stuff there. Outside of that, I'm not really sure what to expect from Poe. I liked him in the original movie, but it feels like in a way they're splitting up the three main characters once again, the three new characters, Finn, Rey, and Poe. So I don't know how much interaction between all of them that we'll get. There's obviously the Poe-Finn friendship, which I assume we'll get little bits at maybe the start and end of the movie, but I think the core will be that they're all separated. With Finn, we obviously know that he's going to be sort of paired up with one of the new characters, Rose, and they're going to go on a kind of undercover mission, it seems like, into the First Order. And again, that's a really clear one of just like, okay, you have the First Order not liking the idea that someone has kind of betrayed them and is now on the other side of things, and you've sort of set up, and the trailers seem to very much hint that Phasma is kind of gunning for Finn because she, in a way, trained him, we know that, I think, and there's a reason for her to go after him, and that is a really good opponent for him to have. If he can ever get the advantage over her in a fight, that's a big moment for him. But also, it seems like they're gonna, I think, probably emphasize more of like, how devoted is Finn to the resistance now that kind of Rey is off doing her thing, Poe is off doing another thing, Han is dead, of course. Like, is he so devoted that he's just going to remain loyal now, or is he going to, kind of like he did in episode 7, try and just go off on his own and kind of avoid the key conflicts? Will there be that sort of, is he going to take maybe the cowardly way out, or is he going to become the hero that I think a lot of the other characters sort of see in him. I think that's going to be the fascinating thing with Finn. Again, like Poe, they need to, I think, really have a good plot for Finn to base that around, and having Rose kind of to play off, I think, could be interesting. As for her, I really, as I said, I haven't watched too much of the preview stuff to really know too much about her, so I'm kind of just like, I'm going to go in and see what they do with that character, but I do like that it seems like Finn is going to have some sort of a character to play off. Who else do we have? I suppose after this, it's kind of like some of the new characters. We know there's Benicio del Toro's character, whose name is DJ, who's either some sort of a hacker or some sort of a like smuggler character. Not really sure, but I'm not really sure if like we're meant to really see him as anything serious or not. Like he's going to be a big player, or just he's going to be a character that they have to go to make something happen in the movie. I'm not really sure on that front. But I think that's kind of, for the most part, it for the main characters. You know, on the other side of things, you have Hux for the First Order. With him, I can see them doing some sort of a rivalry where it's probably like Poe and Hux, kind of who can take each other out first. They seem like they're in very similar positions on either side of the war. Of like, Poe seems to be this kind of next in line to be the leader, and then similarly with Hux on their side. So if there is some sort of a big battle, I could see the idea of like, you know, if Hux is taken out, that's a blow to the First Order. If Poe is taken out, that's a blow to the Resistance, and maybe them establishing that. Otherwise, I assume he'll get some sort of a speech. He'll probably have some sort of a moment where he gets to tactically lead the First Order in some sort of a mission. And they'll probably play up a little bit more of like the idea of like him and Kylo don't like each other so much, and they're maybe trying to get the best relationship with Snoke on the bad guy side of things. But yeah, don't want to go too long in this video, so I'm just going to leave it there. They're my kind of basic initial kind of preview thoughts heading into The Last Jedi. In the comments, let me know how excited you are for The Last Jedi, what characters you're really excited to see, where you think they're going to go, and of course, what you thought of what I had to say here. But yeah, that's it. Probably the next Star Wars video you see from me will be my thoughts on the movie The Last Jedi once it's out. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.